You know, when you become a minister, you dream. You dream of a community. You dream of a home. So thank you for being a part of my dream. You're all amazing, and I love you all. And I wish I was doing the talk this morning, but I'm not. I'm not. I have to give the microphone away, which is perfect, because I get to be fed. It's an amazing opportunity. So Reverend Dr. Ron Fox is with us this morning. If you were here on Friday night, he playfully dedicated our building. There's a picture, Ron, I don't know if you've seen it, of us laughing together. It's adorable. I will make sure you get it.
Oh, cool.
He is, Reverend Ron is the senior minister at CSL Space Coast, so that's on the other side of the state. And he serves as our regional representative. So as ministers, we have a person on the regional level that is an advisor to us and a friend, and he checks in on me from time to time, and we connect, and I love him, and I'm so glad you're back. The first time we met, he came to install me as your senior minister in March of 2018. So it's been about a year and a half, Ron. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you're back for such a beautiful reason. So thank you for doing the dedication Friday night, and please come share your message with us this morning. Reverend Dr. Ron Fox.
So, good morning.
Good morning.
So before I do my talk, I wanted to say a couple of things. And one I found really interesting. My center has a book discussion group too, and we just started a brand new book, also by Dennis Merritt Jones, called Encouraging Words. It's really a great book. Might be something you want to do. And we got to spend all day yesterday with Dennis, which was really cool. We got to ride on his boat and play with his dog, and what more could you want to ride? But I did want to say, by the way, it's also Comic-Con, and I brought my superhero with me too. I want to talk a little bit about Friday night, because Becky, this is my wife Becky, by the way, who is a practitioner emeritus, and also was awarded in 2014 or 15 the Meritorious Practitioner Award. So she's really a person of really high consciousness, and we were so impressed Friday night. I mean, the bricks and mortar are really great, but you guys are what really makes this.
Amen.
The community that you present and the love that you present is so palatable that's what we talked about. We actually went out drinking after the service Friday. I don't remember everything we talked about, but that was part of it, okay? And so, seriously, I mean, what you present, we were so impressed with you and what you did to make Friday night so successful. So thank you for being who you are. And I, as the regional support coordinator, I have responsibility for all the churches in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. So I get to travel around, and I don't see many groups with the consciousness and love that you guys have. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I wanted to, before we begin, we wanted to say one other thing. I didn't realize it was a year and a half, but I want to tell you something Becky said to me on our way home that night after we did the installation. And she turned to me and she said, we were still in the car, and she said, wow, they found the perfect minister for them. She said, it was so obvious being there, the love that they have for Lane and the love that she has for them. You could really see it and really feel it, and those guys are really going to make something of that center. I probably should stop there, but I feel obligated to tell you that the last prediction Becky made before that one was Hillary in a landslide. So now I'll do the talk. So I want to speak today about moving beyond our story. And I want to begin with a couple of quotes. The first one is from Ernest Holmes, who said, "We will always attract to us in our lives and conditions according to our thought." And the other quote is from the Buddha, who said, "Who is your enemy? Mind is your enemy. Who is your friend? Mind is your friend. Learn the ways of the mind. Tend the mind with care." And I know you probably all know this, but both of them are saying, we can use our mind and make it our friend or our enemy by what we put out into the universe and what we allow to come in to our thoughts. And so much of that revolves around the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. And that's what I want to speak to tonight, this morning. So, do most of you know who Jack Kornfield is?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's, in case you don't, he's a Buddhist teacher and he's a psychologist. And I'm gonna actually talk about him twice this morning. But in one of his books, he tells a story about, he says, before I entered the monastery, I meditated for a couple of years. And so then he joins the monastery, and I forgot where it is. It's in either Laos or Thailand. So he moves from the US, where he meditated once in a while, to a monastery in Asia. And he said, we meditate in a forest in a little hut, like almost all day long. And after he does this for a little bit, he realizes that his skin is starting to become numb. And he realizes that the first sign of leprosy is your skin becoming numb. And he also realizes that he was in the Peace Corps, and he worked with lepers for a little bit. And he said, so now my mind takes off. And he's thinking to himself, oh my God, I wonder if they throw people out of the temple if they have leprosy. And then he starts to think how he sees his life going, and he sees himself as a beggar and an outcast, and he envisions himself calling up his mother and saying, Ma, I have leprosy. I can never come home again. And he doesn't know what to do with all of this, so he decides to go to the senior monk, and he doesn't tell him about the leprosy part. He just tells him that his skin is starting to become numb. And the monk says to him, when you start to meditate like we do all day long, your body undergoes some physiological changes. So don't worry about it, and just look at it with mindfulness. And Cornfield writes, for 3 days I lived as a leper. What will my mind do next? And then he quotes the 10th principle of Buddhist psychology. And this is what it is. Thoughts are often one-sided and untrue. Learn to be mindful of thought instead of being lost in it. And he's kind of saying the same thing Ernest Holmes did and the Buddha did. Just be mindful. Look at what you're thinking, and just kind of separate yourself from it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But in one of his books, Wayne Dyer writes about excuses that we use. And really, the excuses, stories would just be as good a word as excuses. And I think he's got like 18 of them. I want to talk about like maybe 5 or 6. And one of them is, if you've got a dream and something that you really want to do, one of the stories we can tell ourselves to not do it is, it's going to be really difficult. And when I saw that, I thought, so what? I mean, think about it. If you've got something that's really important to you, or you've got a dream that you want to start to work on, why shouldn't it be difficult? What kind of dream would it be if it was easy to do? If you could say, I'm going to start a business and next week we'll be grossing $1 million, I mean, it's not going to work, Some parts of life are cool when they're difficult, and you have to strive and learn and grow as part of it. And he said, one of his other ones was, it will be risky. And that's probably true. But it's joy and the excitement of doing that and realizing, wow, I did something that was pretty difficult and I overcame the risks, really is what makes it worthwhile. You know, when Beck and I lived in Southern California, I decided that I wanted to leave corporate life and I was going to start my own business. And I mean this absolutely literally. All of my friends told me, you know you're going to fail, right? You're never going to make it because you picked a risky business to do. And not only that, you'll never get another job in the corporate world because they'll say he didn't want to work in the corporate world. Heck with them, we're not going to hire him. One person in my entire life said to me, go for it, I know you'll be a success. Right there. And the point is, when I made it, and I really did do well, it felt so good to be able to say, yeah, I really beat the odds. It was difficult and it was risky, but I did it. And it's such a great feeling about yourself. And it's not so much an ego as being able to say to yourself, if I could do this, what could I not do? What is there that could stop me? Third thing that Dyer talks about is there will be family drama. No, somebody said no. And you know, the people in our lives that create the drama for us, most of the time, they're doing it because they love us. And if we want to step out in life, they're scared for us. And so you need to be able to overcome that. I'll just give you two quick examples. We had a lady, Beck and I had a church in Arizona, right outside of Phoenix. And we had this lady who was a member of the church way before we got there. And one day she came to me after church and she said, can I talk to you in your office? And I said, sure. And she said, this was my last Sunday here. I'm not going to be coming back. And I was like stunned. I said, why not? She said, my son doesn't think it's a good idea that I come to this church. And I looked at her, I said, your son's going to decide for you what church you go to? And she said, yeah, I don't want to cause trouble. And the point is, nobody can choose certain things in your life for you. Even if there is family drama, it's worth it to live your dream and to live the story that you want to tell yourself. I know this is really an extreme case, but when I was in my late 20s or early 30s and married to my first wife, I made a life decision that my mother didn't like, and she never spoke to me again for the rest of her life. You know, and I, at times, well, actually, to tell you the truth, we didn't get along great, so I didn't care that much. But when I look back on it, even if I would have, it wouldn't have mattered because it's my life. You know, at a certain point, you differentiate between your folks and you have to live what you believe is the life that you want to live. We get so trapped in our stories and the versions of our life, and we tell ourselves, you know, I'll never amount to anything. I've been a failure at everything I've done. We get stuck in the story and we judge everything by that. And then we gather more information to reinforce the story. We just got done teaching a foundation class, and in one of the weeks they have a diagram that shows what happens, and it basically shows a thought dropping into the creative medium and then coming out in life and then circling back. So if you have this story that's a negative story, you drop it in, it goes into the creative medium, it comes out, and you reinforce it, and you go around in this circle continuously over and over again until you have a new thought that goes into the creative medium and comes out, and you change your story. You know, it's Ernest said, change your thinking, change your life. So I have not read this book, but I read a story about this book called The Shark and the Albatross. And what it's about is somebody who wanted to see the first flight of an albatross landing on the water. And so they had 2 film crews doing this. They had one film crew in a cage that was suspended above the water, and that was the crew that was filming the bird. And they had another film crew, which I don't know why anybody would want this job, but they were underwater filming, swimming with the shark and filming the shark. And what would happen is the albatross would land on the water and the shark would be under swimming and time it perfectly and jump up and grab the bird. Now, in this story, the shark missed the bird. So, but the point was, after they spoke to the film crews, and the person that wrote this blog said, the film crew that filmed the bird empathized with the bird. The film crew that swam with the sharks were in awe of the beauty and the power of the shark. So they empathized with the shark. And the point of it is, their perspectives were influenced by how they filmed the event. And the novelist Anais Nin once wrote, "We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are." So I want to talk to you about something you probably never thought you would hear about this morning. I want to talk to you about ants. Okay, ants, A-N-T-S. And actually what it stands for is automatic negative thoughts. Automatic negative thoughts. And this concept was created by a psychologist named Daniel Amen. And there are a couple of different definitions, but one of them is, think about this. When we have these stories that we tell ourselves, particularly if they're negative stories, they become so much a part of us that when we're doing negative talk to ourselves, we don't even realize that we're doing it. It just comes and it's there. And so the first thing we need to do to become aware, to change it, is to become aware of it and then change the story. I'm going to talk about changing the story in a little bit. But I thought I'd give you 2 examples with myself. And the first one is before I ever heard of the concept of ants, and the second one is after. So the first one, I had a church in Auburn, California. And I was facilitating a class on self-image, okay, and developing a positive self-image. And there were about 10 of us sitting around a table. And at some point, I was waving my arms, and I had a pen in my hand, and I dropped the pen on the floor. And as I bent down to pick up the pen, under my breath, I said, "Klutz." And when I came up with the pen, my board president was sitting right across from me, and we were friends. And she said, "Did you hear what you just did?" And I had no idea that I said it. And I said, "No, what did I do?" She said, "You're leading a class in self-image, and you just called yourself a klutz." And that's kind of what he was talking about. It's so insidious, you don't even realize that you're doing it. And you know, if you think about this, most of us talk to ourselves in a way we would never talk to anybody else. You would never call somebody the names you call yourself internally when you screw up, right? So let me just give you another example. Being aware of these ants. So, and this one happened not that long ago. So the minister in Ocala is a friend of mine, and she put on Facebook that she was looking for people to do a TEDx talk. I have always wanted to do a TED talk. And so she said, "If you're interested, get in touch with me." So I get in touch with her. And this is what she tells me. So first of all, I said, "What's the difference between a TED talk and a TEDx talk?" And she said, "A TEDx talk is a local talk." And she said, "So here's the deal, Ron. We usually get about 60 applications, and we want to do 5 to 6 of them local people. So we have about 60 openings, 6 openings with 60 people applying. My first thought was, I'm not that good. I'm not gonna get that job. I'm gonna forget about it. Why put in all of that work? Because I only got a 1 in 10 chance of getting picked. And I sat with it for a while, and then I said, what are you doing? Why would you even give up without trying? And I honestly did think about it, klutz, you know, how you do it, and you tell yourselves these stories. And so I said, no, I can't quit and not at least look further. Now, I made the decision not to do it for Ocala is pretty far away from where we lived, and they wanted a major time commitment. So I didn't do it, but I didn't do it not because I was telling myself the story, I'm not good enough. And it made a difference, at least in how I felt. You know, one of the things we need to do is to start looking at the stories we tell ourselves and what it does to our life, the happiness that it drains away from us. You know, I saw another story about a young guy who was paralyzed playing football. And right after it, his story about his life was, my life is over. After a few months, his story changed to, when I played football, I was a really selfish guy. I lived for me and for partying, and that's all that mattered. I can be a better man than that. He went to college, and now he's a counselor that works with other people who are paralyzed. We can change our stories. One of the things it's called, we can make different narrative choices. Different narrative choices. We can make the choice to edit our story differently. We can make the choice to interpret our story differently. Ernest Holmes, let me give you another quote from Ernest Holmes. He said, the student should take time every day to see his life as he wishes it to be, to make a mental picture of his ideal. So we can change that story. We can put a whole different story out into the universe. Mary Manning Marcy, I guess she goes by Mary Marcy now. One of the things she says, you know, if you've been having a tough time and you haven't succeeded and you've struggled, instead of getting down on yourself, you can say, up until now. Think about that difference that makes in your life, rather than having a negative outlook, to say up until now, and it speaks to being able to change. So let me give you another example that I found really fascinating. A group of social scientists did a study with 52 couples, and they asked them, how did you meet? That was the question they asked them, how did you meet? Based on that question, these social scientists were able to predict with 94% accuracy which of the couples would still be married in 3 years and which couples would be divorced. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
You know what it was? The couples that told a positive story about how they met would still be married in 3 years. The couples that had a negative story about how they met were divorced. When I read that, I ran to Becky. I said, how did we meet? What and she told me it was the worst blind date. You know what? We did meet on a blind date, and she did tell me that on the date that it was the worst. But somehow we've overcome it. So I want to tell you a story. This is also a Jack story that I started out with. It's, for me, when I read this story that he told, that I'm going to tell you, it was one of the best examples I have ever heard of somebody telling themselves a story about themselves and it affecting their life in such a deep way. And no matter how many times I tell this story, it always brings tears to my eyes. So here's the story. It's Jack Cornfield was doing counseling with this woman. Her name is Paula. And she comes to him. She's just had undergone a wrenching divorce. And her husband has left her and her 6-year-old son. And he wrote that she's feeling grief, she's feeling anger, and she's feeling pain. And she tells him that a voice kept telling her how unlovable she was and that she would always be abandoned for her life. And she felt that this was her story because when she was 3 years old, her father walked out on her and her mother, and soon after that he died, so she never got to see him again. And she believed that it was her fault that her father left the family, that she was flawed and she was unlovable. So after they were doing this counseling for a few months, Cornfield asked her if she would go back with him to that night and speak to him about what happened. So she did. And she says, I'm 3 years old. I'm standing on the top of the staircase. And once again, my parents are fighting. And then he grabs his suitcase, and without even looking at me, he leaves out of my life. And she said to him, it was agonizing. He didn't even look up at me. And Cornfield asked her, what were you thinking when that happened? And she said, I did something wrong. Something with me is not good. Otherwise, he would have stayed. So they sit in silence for a while. And then he says to her, would you be willing to go back again with me, but this time enter the experience of your father that night? And she agrees to do it. And he said, and this is the point, he says to her, so how does your body feel when you become him? And she says, tight, rigid. I feel like I can explode. I'm terrified. I'm in a marriage that I never wanted. I'm in a dead-end job. I've got to get out of here. We fight all the time. I have to escape. If I don't escape, I'll die. And so Cornfield says to her, she says, and so now I pick up my suitcase. And Jack Cornfield says to her, do you know your daughter is standing at the top of the staircase? And she says, yes, but I can't look at her. Because if I look at her, I won't go. And I have to go. I love her. I love her so. But I have to get out. And Cornfield says to her, so tell me, who made up the story you were unlovable? And she says, I did. And he says to her, is it true? And she says, not really. And she laughs. And he said, because he says to her, are you sure it's not true? And she laughs. And she says, yes. And the point is, one false story in this woman's head every relationship we had with men for her entire life. And once she was able to see that, and once she was able to change her story, she was free. And any of us can do that. Any of us can look at our life and say, and if, particularly if we don't like where it is, and say, what am I telling myself to get me where I am? And if we don't like that, we can edit it and we can change it. So I want to close with something from a lady named Donna Markova, who wrote, I will not die an unlived life. And she wrote what I'm about to read to you. She wrote it the night her father died, because he was convinced that he didn't matter. And this is what she wrote. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of failing or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. God bless you. Thank you for being here.